Okay, so hello everyone. Hello, Dr. Srour and Ruano. Thank you again, Doctor, for accepting our invitation and for joining us today. And so, as we all know, Lebanon has recently experienced one of the, if we can say, the harshest attacks, and with homes and buildings destroyed, whether it's in the southern suburbs of Beirut, Bekaa, and south of Lebanon. So, with us today is Dr. Issam Srour, Professor of Civil Engineering at MSFEA UB. So, and for those people who don't know much about this topic, I highly invite and encourage everyone to go watch the Merge podcast especially the episode of Dr. Srour with Dini Shhade, where they tackle and delve deep into the issue of recycling the war rubble and where they talk about strategic strategies and frameworks about this topic. So, the Sustainability Club at AUB being us, we wanted to have a continuation of this conversation that you had and focus more on the environmental and ecological aspects of this issue. We want to widen the perspective of students on this topic and not keep it limited to students of engineering and architecture, but include people from various expertise and majors. So now I will give the floor to Ruano to start off the conversation.
Okay, so again, hello, Professor. Thank you for joining us for this episode. And we will start with the first question, which is the environmental impact of the past rubble. So, as you mentioned in the Merge podcast, that you were first inspired by the rubble that was there in 2006 when you came back to Lebanon. And so, how has the rubble from past wars, particularly that which was improperly dumped, affected Lebanon's environment from then until now? And could you provide us with a specific examples such as riverbeds or other natural systems that have been impacted by this?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rawana and Ahmad, for this opportunity. We're discussing today a topic that is of high relevance and importance, not just to us researchers and academicians, but citizens of Lebanon, really at that level. The scale of what we're seeing in the country, as Ahmad mentioned, is probably unprecedented, and therefore the consequences, if we don't manage rubble in a sustainable, responsible manner, will be tremendous, unfortunately. So it is our responsibility. Your question here, Rwana, is spot on. It's and the first thing that people should be looking into when they're facing disasters like this one. What can we learn from the past? How in the past we managed rubble, and how did it affect the environment? And was that impact a one-time off impact, or was it really on the long run? Unfortunately, we don't have a good track record of managing rubble in Lebanon, whether it's what we call regular demolition waste, or rubble from natural disasters as earthquakes or man-made disasters like war. Perhaps the greatest previous disaster we had with regards to rubble goes back to 2006, 18 years ago. So I'll talk a little bit about it, but there's also other examples that go even farther in history. For example, we went through a 15-year civil war from 75 to 1990, and there was quite a bit of war rubble that was generated, and some of it was used for various activities at the time. But if we focus mainly on the rubble that came from the 2006 war, summer 2006, unfortunately, like you said, it was improperly dumped. Much of it was dumped next to the sea, to the airport, on the shoreline of the Mediterranean. And there were sporadic efforts for recycling, especially in a few places in the south. But the bulk of the rubble, especially the ones from the southern suburbs of Beirut, Dahieh, ended up, a lot of them, next to the seaside, and they were there for about 10 years. They were there for about 10 years until another environmental disaster hit the country, and that was the trash crisis, which you probably remember. Those rubble, much of it was used to make a landfill next to the airport. So the impact was sustained, unfortunately. There was a lot of materials that collapsed into the sea because of those two big piles that were there. So that's one big example. Other examples I mean, you just have to drive up the mountains and valleys, and you look left and right, and you'll see a lot of construction demolition rubble that is dumped on the sides of the hills, blocking the fauna and flora, blocking riverbeds, and so on and so forth. So, but perhaps the two piles next to the airport are probably the biggest example that comes to my mind and as a big visual scar really on our nature. Yeah.
Okay, yes, thank you for your answer. So we'll move to the next question, which is the future implication of this unmanaged rubble. And so if the rubble from the current conflict is not properly managed, what long-term environment and urban consequences would Lebanon face? And how might this exacerbate the existing challenges with waste management and resource depletion?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like in the past, just 10 times worse.
Yeah.
The scale of the destruction is unprecedented. No one really has full accurate estimates on the scale of damage. There are different estimates left and right, but what we know for sure is that we're talking about multifold. So if in 2006 we had this much amount of rubble, now we have 5 times, 10 times, maybe more, but definitely a multiplier effect. One. Two, we have rubble all over the country. In 2006, it was primarily focused in one area in the southern suburbs, I think Hartharik, and then a few towns in the south and so on. Whereas now you have, first of all, a lot bigger destruction in the southern suburbs, one. Two, you have many more villages in the south, hundreds of villages that were either wiped out or nearly wiped out all over the south. And then in the Bekaa, you have massive destructions as well. So there's a much wider geographic distribution. Now, what are kind of the future implications if we don't in a responsible manner deal with the rubble? Well, on the short term, I think we're going to have a lot of human-related risks, starting with the demining process, if not done properly, or even the hazardous material. A lot of it is related to the weapons that were used, such as white phosphorus, possibly other types of weapons. So if there is no proper management, we're going to have another humanitarian problem, unfortunately. We know that the army is working on demining, so and that's fantastic, but we just don't know how effective and how comprehensive and speedy that process is. So that's on the very short term. I would say on the short to medium term, there's a major impact potentially on nature, depending on what is done with that rubble, where it goes after this, whether on a temporary basis or on a long-term basis. And we are in a country where temporary versus long-term sometimes a fuzzy concept. So the impact on nature might be tremendous. We're talking about protected nature, such as the sea, mountains, riverbeds, and so on. So that's a challenge, future implication. And then I would say on the long term as well, obviously, the further we contribute to the degradation of nature in Lebanon, the more we have problems on the long run for anything living in this country. So it's a multi-stage problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about stages, you mentioned the 4-step process, actually 6-step process of basically recycling this rubble. And so what sustainable practice can be integrated into each step to ensure minimal environment impact and maximum efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. First of all, there are 4 primary steps that have to take place very quickly. So in a way, that's fine, what you wrote there. I mean, I would say you got it right. I would start, number 1 is the immediate danger with regards to unexploded ordnance, UXOs, which I'm sure there's hundreds or thousands of them across the various torn buildings and infrastructure. So the demining process is key. The more effective that process and timely that process, the lower the probability of having accidents. So that's extremely important from a human perspective. Number 2, cleaning as well. The hazardous material is quite dangerous. White phosphorus is dangerous. There's also other materials that we know are dangerous in the rubble. we know that there's probably some asbestos in a few places. So there needs to be some testing to see the extent of it, and plans in place for handling the asbestos and doing the proper abatement to avoid that asbestos being people breathing it. Other than asbestos, we have a unique situation in that we have prevalent solar systems across our homes in the country, especially outside Beirut, and that's fantastic. But when it comes to rubble, that means a lot of batteries with heavy metals that are destroyed now, and they are mixed within the rubble. So you have big question marks on those heavy metals being dumped in different parts of the country and leaching into the soil and to the sea. Big questions. So we're still in the 2 steps of demining and cleaning, and those really have to be done in situ to the most possible before the rubble is handled. Then comes the process of sorting, and there a little bit will take place in situ. Again, you have the time dimension, so we need to be aware that a lot of people want to move. A lot of people want the rubble to be moved a little bit before they reach their homes. So there might be some minimal sorting that takes place. Maybe furniture, some metals that have an economy. The metals will actually, probably, a lot of the metal has already been taken. I won't be surprised. So there's some sorting that has to take place quickly in situ. And then comes the important step of relocating, which, as I understand, the government is now initiating that process of relocating the rubble, simply because people want to reach their homes and start the healing process, the rebuilding process. And relocating here, the idea is, especially when you have disasters like this one, you relocate first to what we call transfer stations or transition stations or intermediate site, whatever you want to call it. And there you have a little bit more time to do more sorting. So more sorting will take place, where we try to separate the concrete from the steel, from the glass, from the wood, from the plastic, from the batteries, and so on and so forth. And then we go with the final step, which hopefully will feature a lot of recycling. There are some elements where the economy and the market are working in our favor, such as metals. So that won't take a lot of effort. But there are others that require a little bit more of a coordinated effort, a little bit more of a study of the market. I'm talking about the big bulky material, the concrete, the masonry unit, the blocks, the tiles, and so on, big heavy materials. But this is where we have a huge opportunity. If we're able to recycle, to come up with a framework in collaboration with the various government authorities, maybe private sector as well, for sure. If we can recycle for once that material, not only we save the natural systems in Lebanon from receiving a lot of this waste, but also will save the natural system in reducing the demand for new materials, as we know there will be a lot of reconstruction. So it'll be a dual benefit, double benefits if we do that properly. I hope I answered your question enough. I could talk about this for hours.
Yeah. So our next question is actually about this dual effect that you mentioned. And so could you elaborate a bit more on how adopting these sustainable downcycling or upcycling methods can help alleviate this pressure? But also, what are some examples of upcycling and downcycling that can be done, and what's their positive and negative aspect?
Yeah. Look, any kind of recycling, whether it's upcycling or downcycling, in my opinion, is great. It will be a big improvement to what was done in 2006. In 2006, our last major similar disaster, although much smaller scale, metal, to my understanding, was quite well taken and recycled or sold as scrap material, which is fine. What we're advocating for this time is having casting a much wider net in terms of the material streams that we would like to recycle, while meeting the time constraints, the time pressures, and in a cost-effective manner. At the end of the day, this is not a research project per se that we can work on for months or years and so on. We don't have a lot of time, so we have to have frameworks and models that are implementable right away on the spot and economical for people to buy them. So some of the ideas here on recycling, setting metal aside, there are markets now even for other materials for recycling that are quite well established. And in terms of plastic, that's another example. Quite a bit of plastic. Forget about CDW, even from regular municipal solid waste. If you guys just walk around the neighborhood around AUB and just watch and what's going on at the different garbage bins and how collectors are coming in and taking a lot of the plastic, of course, the metals, but also the plastics as well, and so selling them. Now, the conditions under which they're done are questionable, no problem, no doubt. But at the same time, it is a positive activity from an environmental perspective. So that's an example of recycling with the plastics. And the big part, the big component, if you take now any building, probably about 80% by weight is concrete walls, masonry walls, like the one you're seeing behind me, tiles. And this is a lot of materials that with natural material, with processed material mixed and used, and it would be a shame not to reuse it. And what we would like to see, where our expertise is at AUB and our program and our research program over the past 15 years, is in recycling this big bulky materials. So we're offering help to various authorities in the country, government authorities in the country, Ministry of Environment, Council of Ministers, in terms of recycling the big bulky material in a sustainable, efficient, and effective manner by reusing a lot of this material in new construction, reusing a lot of the concrete and block powders, aggregates, fine aggregates, coarse aggregates, and so on, sand, cement, recycled cement, all this material, reusing it in new applications for new masonry blocks, for roadway constructions, when we're building roads and we have the layers under the asphalt road. The requirements are fairly simple and standard nowadays, that a lot of this material can be used with no question. I don't call it downcycling. To me, this is recycling, if not upcycling. Anything we do relative to our track record is really upcycling, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, so now we want to talk about involving the students. And so, obviously students are going to be watching this. And so how can they be part of this? How can they research maybe these different ways of recycling, upcycling? What could they do? How could they participate in this process?
Thank you for this question, Rawana. Certainly, I would say why before even we talk about how. I think students, first of all, they are Lebanese citizens. They are the future of Lebanon. They are the future professionals. They're the future leaders in the country. And this is a huge opportunity to capitalize on your energy as students, Ahmad, Rawana, and all other AUB and Lebanese students in general, capitalizing on your energy, your passion, and your creativity. So whether it's on the participating in the healing process, which is multifaceted, it could be in terms of participating in various activities to clean houses, make them livable again, helping people in, and we're talking about starting with ourselves, with our own community. I was at a meeting yesterday called by the Center for Civic Engagement and Community Service at AUB and the American Society of Civil Engineers, where this was a main topic. How can AUB students help themselves and other AUB students in getting their homes cleaned up, ready, so that people very quickly go back to resuming normal life there. So that's step number one. Two, I would say in helping us researchers and academicians in finding and working on sustainable solutions, whether it's on the short term currently. I'm working heavily with the Nature Conservation Center, NCC, at AUB, Ministry of Environment, as I told you, on a volunteer basis in helping and finding sustainable solutions. So I could use any power that is available from a young, bright mind. And then, on the longer term, participating in exciting projects, FYPs, master's theses, independent research studies, looking at long-term solutions so that we have plans. Next time there's a problem, we are ready to handle that problem. We don't have to always be reactive, always waiting until the problem is there or it's done for us to start thinking of solutions. We want to at least once have plans in place and rely on them when such catastrophes happen. And then, of course, the last thing I'll say maybe here is it's not only a relevant topic to students from engineering, architecture, environment. It's really for everyone. I'll give you a little example. Advocacy. You guys, even students from completely different background, political studies, and you name it, could help a lot in advocating for sustainable solutions. Really, it'll be hard to find any major at AUB where you cannot really relate to this problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you so much for coming to this and answering our questions. And I hope that you inspire students to actually help you with this research and also come up with their own research. So again, thank you so much for having this conversation with us, and thank you, Ahmad. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, Rawana and Ahmad, and the Sustainability Club at AUB. I really look forward to working more and more with students so that we can address these problems in a much more sustainable manner than we've ever done in Lebanon. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you so much. For the efficiency of the concrete, for example, if we recycle or upcycle the concrete from the rubble, does it lose some kind of its strength of whether
good question.
it's compression strength or its density or porosity? Does it change or?
So you're a civil engineering student?
No, he's an architecture student like me.
Oh, architecture as well. Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Look, so in terms of, so you have things working in your favor and things against you. If you take recycled concrete, for example, even masonry in it, they have cement in them, and cement is, as horrible from an environmental perspective as it is as a material. It's got longevity factors and structural values that made it survive more than 100 years. So you can capture a lot of it. So the adhesion properties, you don't lose them when you recycle. So there's a lot of research that we're working on in reusing a lot of the concrete, recycled concrete, in new concrete for structural purposes. So for beams and slabs and columns, like this is super hot in terms of research, and that's for structural applications. On the non-structural, so like a concrete for sidewalk or masonry block, that I don't care for the masonry block. I want it as partition. I really don't care much about the compressive strength for that. A little bit, but it's really hard to screw up. So it's so Honike, it's really you can, the standards in other parts of the world allow for like full replacement. They'll tell you basically the language we use when we say recycled is how much replacement you want to make. So do you want to replace 100% the aggregates with recycled aggregates, wala 50, wala 25, or whatever. So currently, if you look at the standards in Northern European countries, especially in Northern Europe, Germany, Holland, and North, they allow for new concrete application replacement to something like, last time I looked, maybe it was 5-6 years ago, up to like 50% in coarse aggregates could be RCA, recycled coarse aggregate. We'll find it was still a topic of research. We'll find لأنه في chemical properties that are tougher with the sand, the fine aggregates. بس بالcoarse aggregate much higher percentages. هذا عم نحكي structural. You go in the non-structured, it's almost like it's basically 100%. يقول لك بس إنه remove the tires, remove the glass, remove the plastic, and just use it as is. And if you look in those countries, people pay to dump their waste. They have to. And it's part of the economic model. And there are SMEs forming recycling plants in Europe. I've been to many of them. Morocco, حتى مش Europe, where you bring the material and then the recycling plant يصير مثل كأنه quarry. It's like a quarry because they have the same equipment. They buy the materials from you and then they process it and they sell it. Okay, so the business models are there. And for the applications like blocks and low strength concrete or a sub base تحت الطريق under the road, easy, no problem. Allow for 100% recycle.
Yeah, this is so interesting because like if you're saying like if we use it 100% for the non-structural elements, so then we can use it a lot for like in this situation, especially because like a lot of the building materials are non-structural, and even if we use completely new ones for the structural and the recycled completely for the non-structural, we would be recycling a huge amount already. So
exactly, Rowana, exactly, and that's what we're advocating now with the government. We have a one-time chance.
Yeah, I think our job is like raising the awareness and telling people more about this, because not like most people just don't know about the efficiency of recycling the rubble.
And guiding, like we're happy guiding.